Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinamadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Good morning to the next session. This is going to be a session that talks about Ayurveda, Yoga and the health challenges. And the speakers are dignitaries and senior scientists in this session. And we have a chairperson, Dr. Ashok Vaidya. Vaidya sir is mentor of many mentors, a physician, clinical pharmacologist, and he has touched many dimensions of Ayurveda research. He is known as father of reverse pharmacology, but he is much beyond that, and he really teaches many things, very fundamental concepts, and how to build the modern science and ancient wisdom together. He has coined the term ancient insights and modern discoveries. I request Vaidya sir to come on the stage and to chair the session. I request Dr. Julia Arnold to come on the stage because she is going to be the next speaker. Thank you, Vaidya sir. Thank you, Dr. Julia. The first speaker of this session is Dr. Gururaj Mutalik. Dr. Mutalik is such a person who has studied Yoga, Ayurveda, Sanskrit and modern medicine. He was the Dean of BJ Medical College in 1960s. Then he was invited to join WHO Office of India. Meanwhile, he also worked as Director General of Health Services, Government of Maharashtra. Then he was invited at WHO Office Geneva, and he retired as Director of WHO in United Nations Office. A scholar himself in Eastern sciences and also biomedical sciences, Dr. Mutalik brings a very rare person and a different perspective, and he's going to talk about AyurYoga, how we can synthesize these two systems approaches, which is an overdue integral approach for healing sciences. Although Dr. Mutalik is going to talk with us, he's right now in Boston, and he stays in Florida. He could not physically attend this meeting, but he has sent us the voice synchronized slides, and we request my colleague Akash to start the slide.
Respected Vice Chancellor, Dr. Vaidya, invited scientists, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to be called to present a keynote address to this important conference with so many scientists in the audience. This occasion prompts me for a recent and remote memory, and I'm going to take a minute or two to walk on the memory lane. I recall a memorable meeting in recent past with high-level postgraduates on one side and some of their preceptors, where I had the honor to be, met at Kaivalya Dham at Lonavala in impeccable setting. We called the meeting as the meeting of the minds, MOM. It was a kind of retreat for 2 days, where Dr. Vaidya and many of my friends, including Dr. Prabhushan Patwardhan and Professor Deshpande and I, were present. It was a wonderful 2-day interactive meeting where, with no holds barred, we freely and frankly discussed some vital points connected with the AYUSH. The other memory is remote. I had just been given a degree certificate in MD in 1955 at the hands of nobody else than the very first Vice Chancellor, the great Dr. Jaker. Immediately after the convocation was over, we met in the Vice Chancellor's room at his special invitation. Look at his sensitivity. The newly graduated, postgraduates who had the first MDs and the first PhDs. I recall that there was one other doctor, Dr. Urmila Kumari, who along with me was a classmate who got an MD in gynecology, and I got MD in general medicine. And then a delete was presented to one Professor Muguli. We were only three of us, and Dr. Jaker proudly said that you are my first discovery in the gold mine of this university, and we were so flattered and so inspired at his presence. And what we heard that day has left an imprint which will never be erased from my life. Now, coming to this conference and its important objectives, its formidable challenges, this is a meeting of vital importance. AYUSH, a concept for ground action. Now that we have governmental backing, first time in history, Rajashray, I call it, very important, which many people take it as a criticism. The pride of India, the science, the scientific pride of India, AYUSH, backed by the government with unlimited possibilities only if we have the sense to embrace the right path for research and development. And more importantly, it has opened the door wide for integration of various disciplines into a holistic, through a holistic approach into a one cutting edge healing science. And the scope is really unlimited if done in the right way. However, we should be warned that there are many, many formidable challenges because we already are a divided house. We have no one ministry of holistic medicine. Medical education ministry does not speak to the health ministry. The health ministry doesn't speak to the human resources ministry. At the peripheral level, the diversity and division is much more. Medical colleges and Ayurvedic colleges, homeopathic colleges, there is nothing in common at all. The dialogue does not exist. Collaboration does not exist. But however, integration, holistic approach to healing sciences, it's an idea whose time has certainly come. Now let me start. I have already been introduced in superlative terms due to the grace and kindness of my friends here. But let me give you a little personal touch how I live. Usual achievements, chairman and director and all this, that is not important. What is important is, at the age of 90, I lead a retired life, more busy than my working life. I live in a simple ashram, very comfortable, in the United States in a city called Sun City Center, which is a place for retirees. And at this ashram, I keep myself busy in practicing yogic meditation and teaching it, holding classes in Bhagavad Gita and counseling, studying mind-body medicine, reading and writing umpteen diverse disciplines, and I'm a very happy soul. It's only because Dr. Girish Tillu, the organizer of this conference, who spends regularly, sometimes he spent 4 months with me, and in the old Gurukul fashion, and I couldn't say no to him, and therefore I am presenting this at his express request with a sense of duty. Now, what are we going to examine in this conference? Two things. I'll share first a few key points on AyurYoga as an integral approach to the future of healing sciences, which is the theme of your conference, and reflect what theme what this theme implies. Beyond the specific focus, I will try to think aloud a few thoughts on the theme of the conference about the challenge that is inherent in the theme itself. I will briefly examine the state of health in India and the world. I will survey the health damage that reductionist approach, which reigns still supreme in all branches of healing sciences, is wreaking on the health of the people. I will speak about the reductionism of physical sciences and modern medicine that is still the guiding light of our research. And I will compare and contrast this with the systems biology approach, which is the right holistic approach which is emerging now. And let us examine whether the twain can meet, or whether it's merely a term we are bandying about without much meaning and without much progress. Then I will take as an example of holistic approach the one subject which is very dear to my heart, that it is time to unite, to join, to work with concordance on AYUSH, Ayurveda or AYUSH as a whole, and yoga as a science, one dealing with the mind, the other dealing with the body, and to begin holism to sciences by the confluence of Ayurveda and yoga, which we describe with a new term, AyurYoga, or you can call it AYUSH yoga. And what, why, and how of AyurYoga we will begin to discuss. Athato AyurYoga Jidnyasa. Start with examining the formidable challenges inherent in the attachment of the objective strengthening of transdisciplinary research, the theme of this conference. I think that there are many assumptions in this title, and some assumptions may later on haunt to us if we don't pay attention at this stage of the conference. First of all, knowledge of transdisciplinary research and its true ongoing activities. We must be very clear. How much do we know about transdisciplinary research and what is on the ground? Then we have to identify means to strengthen. What do we mean by strengthening? Are we asked for adequate funding or more funding? Are we talking about paucity of human resources? Or are we talking about research methodology and the difficulties of obtaining the end point of holistic approach through reductionist means? There are methodological obstacles. Are we talking about that? Or are we talking about the concept as a whole? Conceptual constraints, such as, is there a concordance at epistemological level? Are we talking about oranges and apples and trying to unify them into another monster fruit? Or are we training about training? I know that we will be touching all these. These are all extremely important components. But what is the precise focus of our conference? We should identify. And then who are the participants? Besides these 300 odd scientists which have gathered there, who are the real participants at the ground level? And what is their level of training? What is their level of experience? These are extremely important questions which we have to deal with. Next point, development of what is called as a culture of research, which is lacking sorely in our country. We'll come to it later. Then there are other requirements like leadership, scientists with a character who pursue truth, nothing else, with all intellectual honesty, comprehension of philosophy of holism, and then ability to read and understand ancient texts. All our treasures are written in Sanskrit, and all we deal with translations. It will not do for long. So we have to go back and learn Sanskrit, as scholars of the yore did. They studied Latin and Greek to read Plato. And this is what we precisely have to do. In order to understand Charaka, you have to first learn Sanskrit. There is no shortcut in that. Do we at hand these strategies? these strengths, these programs, and the resources. This is the main theme questions to be asked in this conference. Such questions will need to be answered systematically before we talk with some authority for such transdisciplinary research. Briefly, some of these possible answers and possible approaches. So the first point I want to make is pick up current activities which have proved to be effective. One such current activity comes to my mind. A few years ago, leaders in Pune here, including Dr. Vaidya and Dr. Patwardhan and many others, combined to evolve a program called Training of the Vaidya Scientists. Train Vaidyas as scientists. And also then I suggested later that you all trained scientists as Vaidya, the biochemists and biomedical scientists, statisticians, give them a grounding in Ayurveda and give them a grounding in AYUSH. And then this imaginative program can lead to something big. And it's not a one-time, one-center exercise. It has to be held all over the country with the right mix of preceptors and the disciples. So thus, training of young, bright doctorate students in research methodology comes next. What is now done is the classical methodology of reductionist sciences, physical sciences, and it is crying for a new approach because biology and life and human patients do not lend themselves to reductionist medicine. And we already know how much damage reductionist medicine has done to the cause of health development. The training must be both, not only in procedural techniques and skills, but conceptual as well. And it should be thorough rather than crash courses. It requires to be pursued in multiple academic centers and multiple institutions, formally and informally, and not deviating too far from the Gurukul approach. One teacher and a few students, not a multitude of 200 students in a classroom and where the lecturer hears his own voice and passes on. It should be a major program in all relevant national research programs and publications. Talk a little bit about systems biology and its approach. What is systems biology? Systems biology, as many of you may be knowing, it took roots back in 1950s from the work of Ludwig von Bertalanffy with his basic general systemic theory, which was the first paper he wrote. And over 5 decades, it has matured as a major methodological research approach in order to cure the constraints of reductionist approach of physical sciences. But I am emphasizing and re-emphasizing because these are the qualities which are the backbone of world-class research. And it is not very widespread in our country, I am sorry to say. This is being referred to only because of the dismal state of affairs which we perceive here now and then in our academic and research institutions. You are very much aware during the last few years, a staggering number of 4,305 fake online journals, fake journals, were closed and shut down by UGC, where trash articles used to be published by academicians for a fee, and this reflects sadly on the culture of research that I was talking. Multiple examples of ego-driven, dubious, pioneering claims still abound, and I came across recently one, so I will make a brief reference to it to remind you that this is not an abstract question, but a day-to-day survival necessity. Somewhere in 1980, Dr. Patwardhan, who in my opinion is the foremost biomedical scientist of India and my friend, we have authored a book together. He conceived of a diagram called Systems Ayurveda. And sometime later, when we knew each other, he showed it to me. And I had one look at it. I peered over it again and again. And I said to Patwardhan, this is as clear as mud. As clear as mud. Because there were so many entities, so many lines, so many joining. It was a brave attempt to conceive the philosophy of systems approach, but it was an impossible diagram. And it is still also, it features in one of our books. To my mind, it is like studying Himalayas from, say, 200 miles distance. We have not even reached the foothills. We see some snow peaks there, and we call it as the systems Himalayas. And this is not right. But making a beginning, humble beginning, that we need it, and this is what it could look like, and which every moment we shall revise and refine. Maybe in 10 years' time we'll reach Systems Ayurveda when all the components are there, when we are ready to have a unifying concept arise out of that through computer modeling or some other means, I can understand. Now this tale takes prerequisites for research scientists, particularly for team-oriented multiple disciplinary research. The first and the foremost is leadership. And that leadership must have intellectual honesty, appetite for pursuit of truth, deep motivation, and humility and capacity for hard work. This point is so obvious that these qualities, but I am emphasizing and re-emphasizing because these are the qualities which are the backbone of world-class research. And it is not very widespread in our country, I am sorry to say. This is being referred to only because of the dismal state of affairs which we perceive here now and then in our academic and research institutions. You are very much aware during the last few years, a staggering number of 4,305 fake online journals, fake journals, were closed and shut down by UGC, where trash articles used to be published by academicians for a fee. And this reflects an interview of one of the rising scientists who works with CSIR and who calls herself as the leader and pioneer of systems Ayurveda. What is the subscom? The AyUGenomics. You know, if AyUGenomics has a theoretical leader who one day will conceive, it is the group of Patwardhan. But I was very glad to hear that. If there is another scientist developing in the north, why not? Maybe our path will be shortened and we'll arrive there where we want to go. And I also liked the Jeel because that interviewer was a mischievous, in my opinion, it's got a mischievous, secular-minded journalist. Leadership requires knowledge and deep erudition, scholarship, and besides that, it requires humility. And if they are lacking, you cannot produce any class of leaders when you mentor them. All right. Now let us quickly go to concept of wellness and health. I don't have to spend too much time. You already know, you are fully aware of the Charaka's master definition of swasthya, which is far better than WHO's. You know, there are, according to Ayurveda, we have to address at least eight dimensions of health: physical, intellectual, economic, emotional, environmental, vocational, social, and spiritual health, where there's total security and adequacy. I even can think of the ninth, which is a domestic or marital security, marital health. Unless you live happily, and if there are no conflicts in your mind, then you can give your best. Both Patanjali's Yoga Shastra and Buddhist Eightfold Path have eloquently addressed to all these dimensions of swasthya, but it is enshrined as a classic in the concept of charaka. Wellness is itself self-directed, but involves the upper reaches of limbic mechanisms. In other words, bodily health and mental health cannot be separated. They are inextricably intertwined. With this, we are now in a state to have a look at the global sickness. Despite all these stupendous advances in medicine and miraculous attainments of modern medicine, we have succeeded only in eliminating most of the communicable diseases, or at least controlling them. So our longevity has increased, the average expectation of life has increased, infant mortality has gone down, but we are burdened with almost all the communicable diseases, non-communicable diseases which existed, and added some more in by our lifestyles. And this shows how the indexes of health are in various parts. In advanced countries, there are very few. They are better health. So something to do with economic security. In less advanced countries, there is a very high toll of mortality and morbidity still due to these diseases, and to their burden is added also presence of communicable diseases like malaria, tuberculosis, viral diseases, and so on. And we are in the intermediate stage. You can say that we are B- grade of health, and we are not improving any sooner. Cancers, cardiovascular diseases, stroke are still our major killers. In recent years, diabetes is spreading like an epidemic. Obesity, even in United States, increased from 13% in 1972 to 42% in 2015. There are over 155 millions of people who can be classified in United States as obese. 17% of the children and youth aging 2 to 18 have obesity. 8 million deaths occur annually due to the consequences of obesity. The cost of treatment has been computed at $600 billion annually. And in India, studies done show that this obesity in childhood is also spreading to school in a very major way. There are other major killers. Now we shall talk about it, which shows that the same, what I said, is all valid. Cardiovascular diseases, cancers, chronic respiratory diseases, diabetes take the major toll in India. And the statistics each year are not improving. A third major killer, and that is due to Western reductionist approaches. There is a man called Professor Martin Edel Macquarie, a great scientist. He is called as the father of pancreatic surgery at the Johns Hopkins Hospital. He is a surgical director, professor of surgery, and he wrote a landmark paper in the British Medical Journal in 2016, published on 3rd May 2016, where he has chronicled this sad tale of reductionist approach to medicine that causes only in United States. And he computed that 12,000 deaths per year occur in United States due to unnecessary surgery, 7,000 deaths per year due to medication errors in hospitals, top-class hospitals, 20,000 deaths per year due to other errors in hospital like, mismanagement of electrolytes, 80,000 deaths per year due to infections in hospitals. Imagine if that occurs in the high standard hospitals with plenty of resources, what is the plight in other countries, including ours, where statistics are not always very accurate and revealing. 151,000 deaths per year. Look at this figure, 151,000 deaths per year due to negative effects of prescription drugs. Negative effect of prescription drugs is the drugs which are not across the counter, but one which are prescribed by doctors. Why do they occur? Because of the interaction of drugs about which we know nothing. Really, we know nothing. Conclusion of these statistics of this revealing paper is that much as we gloat about the miracles of medicine, there is a dark cutting edge to them which takes heavy toll in terms of morbidity and mortality. Alright? Now, having concluded these reflections on the theme of the conference, let me take one isolated theme which is very important in my opinion, which is a real translator of the challenges of this conference in a humble way as the very first step, and that is AyurYoga. What is AyurYoga? AyurYoga is a self-evident approach which is underlined in the teaching of Charaka, Sushruta, Patanjali and all these, which are harmoniously one theme, and over the passage of time due to vicissitudes of history, they got separated and took different course. Ayurveda lingered on because no outstanding scientist was born after. No outstanding scientist of his caliber was born in the next 100 years. And that is why Ayurveda lingered on. The Ayurvedic truths are self-evident, but like any other science, they need to grow, they need to develop, they need to rub shoulders with other sciences, absorb strength from others, as Western medicine did. You know, Hippocratic medicine was somewhat like Ayurveda. Hippocrates understood that mind, body and all these are important, their interrelationships are important. But beyond that, and he also knew many truths. Hippocrates said, for example, that the best medicine is administered through the ear, showing the effect of mind and its role in healing. And then, however, then came Galen. Galen was so authoritative in the immortal words of a scientist who was a pioneer, Sir William Osler. 14th century stopped thinking. Nothing happened until they were awakened by the work of Da Profundis and discovery of circulation by Harvey, and then medicine marched on. Then came antibiotic era, then came chemotherapy to cure, and medicine took to the wings and made this miraculous. Then surgery evolved. Then various instruments which until MRI coming from quantum theory, and this is how interactive strengthening of each other's, and nothing of this sort happened to Ayurveda. And then of course we had vicissitudes of foreign invasions where our knowledge went underground, where we didn't have the freedom to practice these. Other disciplines were thrust on us, and that is why holism was lost. And therefore, this is the time to realize reductionism is the mortal enemy of holism. Yoga is synonymous with holism. Let us combine the strength of yoga and with the tenacity of Ayurveda and combine them to have AyUR-YOGA, and that AyurYoga will be the savior, and it's the starting point of our holism. The meaning and purport and vital importance, we referred to an editorial which we wrote to celebrate the International Yoga Day. I hope you have all read it. Otherwise, Dr. Girish Tillu can give you a copy of that. Alright. Out of this AyurYoga, which we call as AyurYoga, which is really the teachings of Charaka and Patanjali. Patanjali's teachings were in vogue in day-to-day life in Charaka's time, so he didn't have to overemphasize them. And that is how they got separated. There was no cross-reference. Each one took and spread in its own way. And out of this, now certain scientists in the West having recognized what a jump this concept is, They have given birth to a new science called mind-body medicine. And that mind-body medicine is nothing but a combination of simple naturopathy employed in Charaka regarding lifestyles, what is written in the Sutrasthana of Charaka Samhita, and basic teachings of Patanjali, Yama, Niyama, while leading to meditation. And that healing force within us, the powerful healing force within us, can be unleashed by this. Mind is a major determinant of health and disease, Charaka says. The natural healing force within us is the greatest force in getting well, said Hippocrates. I told you that he said best medicine is administered through the ear. Now modern research than merely auto-suggest healing thing. It actually produces cerebral plasticity. Certain centers differentially grow and strengthen if you practice yoga. Some brain scan studies have suggested that meditation alters not only brain activity but the brain structure. You know, certain areas which are shown in the diagram, and more singularly the posterior cingulate gyrus leading up to the hippocampus are the seat of the action of meditation. And meditation alters the patient's capacity to interact with the disease in a very major way, and it's a healing process which occurs, which is built inside our body. Most of these take place in the limbic system. Caudate nucleus, cingulate gyrus, this is the main seat of hypertrophy which occurs in chronic meditators which are practicing meditation for more than 10 years. The limbic system is the seat of emotions, moods, feelings, finer thoughts, memory, compassion, and these are the ingredients of health. They produce endorphins, they act on several neuroreceptors. First, to a list of main rationale of the power and potential of this new term. To harmoniously practice the integral teachings of Charaka's science of life, and which is derived actually from Upanishadic wisdom and Gita teachings based on Patanjali's Yoga Shastra. Patanjali's Yoga Shastra derives itself from Upanishads and Gita, where the roots are already very clearly defined. Charaka's Sutrasthana, for example, lays the foundation of this rationale in very clear language, emphasizing that the interconnection exists between the body and the mind. And this is the birth of modern body-mind medicine in the West. A study in depth of Sutrasthana of Samhita leaves no doubt at all in anybody's mind without often using the word yoga. Word yoga, Charaka is describing the entire doctrine of the eight-limbed yoga as the necessary concomitant of swasthya. Sutrasthana 54, 55, 55, 55, 56 spell this out in very clear terms. The doshas themselves are derivatives of trigunas and their interplay. The considerably detailed mandates of disciplined living, which are the backbone of Ayurvedic treatment, Ayurvedic therapy, is simply true yogic practice. And yogic practice is what is anupana. And that is applicable for physical fitness, for optimizing health. One other point I will say for researchers which is important. We take it for granted that human race is a homogeneous race. It is not so. It is not unimodal. The Gaussian curve is a great deceiver for us. Why? Because it takes us to median values. And I call it as the median, oppression of the median values in research. And all our trials are based on finding what happens to the median value. Does the placebo works or does the drug works? Whereas the truth lies in the tail end of the Gaussian curve, and that is the basis of human diversity. Each patient is unique, each individual is unique, so personalized medicine, therefore, is not possible by any reductionist statistical means. We have to have holism in order to have a real glimpse and understand what truth is. Now, we come to the internal strength. Virtually every healing process, immune mechanisms, secretion of hormones, neuroreceptors, neurotransmitters, the internal pharmacy, there is an internal pharmacy more powerful than any laboratory or any pharmacy in the commercial means, and it is mediated through the central nervous system and thus influenced by emotions and thoughts, and so the psychosomatic disease concept is true in almost every case. Even in infectious disease. Why? When there are so many bacteria and viruses flying around, one day you get cold, one day you get influence. Something changes there between psychosomatic status equilibrium, and then disease virus begins to act, or disease bacteria gains thick. And this is what we have to understand. Western science looks something like this. They are in the same state as we were, except that they are able to, ever since genomic studies, human genome studies have been completed, they are able to identify points and draw lines, which when the day we do it in relationship to the tridoshas, we really have the first breakthrough. Till that time, our challenges remain. So our research today has three aspects. There are good developments, there are bad developments, and there are ugly developments. Good, bad, and the ugly. That is life. And this was what I begin to show you. What is good? The concept of AyurYoga. Excellent concept. If we apply it as a basis, many of our problems will be solved. This is the first and the foremost important thing. What is good is yogic healing, naturopathy, practice of yoga which is spreading very well, but there are also abuses. What is promising is mind-body medicine advancing in Western centers of excellence, but then they are not giving due credit, nor are they understanding the intricate doctrines in our ancient texts. They are even changing terminology. Henry Benson, who established the mind-body medicine pioneer, he has written 12 books on this, done studies with Chinese monks and yoga practitioners, but he called it as relaxation response. The word yoga, he would not condescend to use, but now things are changing. Harvard has come up now on a book of Guide to Yoga, Harvard University itself. That is good. Now what is ugly is the commercial aspect of yoga as a multi-billion industry, a street corner exercise, yoga center. They are as common as restaurants and hair cutting salons. In malls you will see yoga center, big billboards, and that is very ugly. But what is good is what is happening in centers of excellence. Now, what is good is the great vanishing species of great Vaidya. They are still present, which we have not made use of them, who practice Ayurveda in their traditional mode, and which Charaka could give them a nod. Great, but then we are not producing these great Vaidyas any longer. Dwarkanaths and Kurups and Nanals and Veni Madhav Shastris, and they're all old age, gone. Many of them are gone. Many of them are like the age of dinosaurs. It is going to about to end. What is ugly is being trained at integrated courses, but practicing modern medicine in low quality, called IMP, means injection medicine practitioner. They do nothing to use Ayurveda in their practice. What is bad is Ayush research without integrity, without character. And however, now I come to Western science looks something like this. They are in the same state as we were, except that they are able to, ever since genomic studies, human genome studies have been completed, they are able to identify points and draw lines, which when the day we do it in relationship to the tridoshas, we really have the first breakthrough. Till that time our challenges remain. So our research today has three aspects. There are good developments, there are bad developments, and there are ugly developments. Good, bad, and the ugly. That is life. And this was what I begin to show you. What is good? The concept of AyurYoga. Excellent concept. If we apply it as a basis, many of our problems will be solved. This is the first and the foremost important thing. What is good is yogic healing, naturopathy, practice of yoga which is spreading very well, but there are also abuses.
Akash, can
What
you
is
come here,
promising
Akash?
is mind-body medicine advancing in Western centers of excellence.
Akash, you have to
But
stand
then
here, please.
they are not giving due credit, nor are they understanding the intricate doctrines in our ancient texts. They are even changing terminology. You know, Henry Benson. Ladies and gentlemen, let me end this presentation with gratitude and homage to some of my heroes in science and philosophy. Here is the four stalwarts of Indian systems of medicine. One is, of course, the incarnation of the very supreme in my beliefs, and the rest you all know. And what they have contributed is captioned in those. Bas. Shariro doshasangraha manasah punardishto rajascha tamevacha. Vayu, Pitta and Kapha are described as bodily doshas. Rajas and Tamas are the determinants of mind origin. Together they act and disease. What more concepts can be, how much more concepts can be written more finely than this? He also said, Shariram sattva saundancha vyadinam ashrayomata tatha sukhanam yogastu sukhinam karanam. Both body and mind can have interactive diseases as well as positive health. The balanced use of this is the cause of the gains, which is perfect health. Shushruta also said, Ekam Shastra Madhyanod. The man who just studies one discipline is very limited. So in order to have enlightenment in practice, you must study many disciplines and grow. And so these are therefore my heroes. There are other heroes. Most, these four scientists, Albert Einstein, Hideki Yukawa, two Nobel Prize winners, then John Wheeler, who deserved more than one Nobel Prize, and Homi Bhabha, our own scientist, who was the father of the nuclear medicine and nuclear development. And they were studying as a group the meeting of great minds in the Institute of Advanced Studies at Princeton, New Jersey. And who did they contribute? Wheeler, a great scientist who had insight in things, he said, we live on an island of knowledge surrounded by a sea of ignorance. As our island of knowledge grows, so does the shore of our ignorance. And how true? As an island of knowledge grows, as a coral island, the shores of ignorance equally grow. So that is the challenge before us. And then there is that great man whom I revere. He is mentored by John Wheeler. He is a great Feynman. If anybody deserves to succeed, Einstein, this is the gentleman who won a Nobel Prize in 1965 for his quantum mechanics, which changed the whole world. And he was a great writer of aphoric sayings also. He said, nobody ever figures out what life is all about, and it does not matter. Explore the world. Nearly everything is really interesting if you go deep enough in anything. Learned very early the difference between knowing the name of something and knowing really something. You can know the name of a bird in all the languages of the world, but when you are finished, you will absolutely know the thing about the bird. So let us look at the bird and see what it's doing. That is what counts. So AyurYoga is the healer bird that deserves deep study. So start studying it deeply. He said again, very pithily, physics is like sex. Sure, it may give some practical results, but that's not why we do it. AyurYoga is totally different. It's the cornerstone of life, wellness and swastha. That's why we must do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mutalik sir. We are going to share these slides with the audience, so some of the technical difficulties could be overcome. With this, we request our next speaker, Dr. Julia Arnold. So Dr. Julia, a scientist who works in tissue microenvironment and cancer, she's studying Ayurveda and she calls herself as a student of Ayurveda. So we requested her to talk about Ayurveda and health challenges. Over to Dr. Julia.
Thank you, Dr. Tilu, for the invitation to speak with you, and thank you to the incredible staff who have been so supportive with such grace and devotion to all of us here. I am really honored and humbled to be in your presence. You are all the experts and the researchers who have been looking into these concepts for many years and trying to understand how Ayurveda works and how we can apply it to the community. And I feel like I wish to learn from you. I have some limited understanding. I appreciate there are many nuances that may be involved. And what I'd like to present is sort of my concept of some of the areas that Ayurveda proposes that we could tap into. And in a sense, maybe not completely throw out the reductionist protocols, but actually leverage them to better understand Ayurvedic mechanisms, better understand some of the mechanisms not of disease but of healing, because I think there are a lot of nuggets in there that we might be able to tap into. I have to work this thing here. This way. So, you can hear me okay? First, my disclaimer, of course, these are my opinions. They don't represent who I work for at the National Cancer Institute in the US. Ayurveda, of course, is the most ancient natural healing system, and while you all appreciate and understand the health and medical approaches of Ayurveda, and it's widely used here in India, in US, people do not know what it is. I'll tell somebody I'm going to go talk about Ayurveda, and they go, what is that? I've never heard of that, and that's very common. I get this a lot. They don't understand the Ayurvedic research paradigm for health, or how to approach rigorous research in this area. But I think that this approach of Ayurveda towards cancer specifically can provide some new clinical targets to integrate into our current cancer care, and that these modalities may validate the traditional concepts and lead to development of new biomarkers for wellness and disease. So if you look at the research, if you go to the PubMed or Scopus or any of research websites, look for Ayurveda, and let me see if this works. There we go. Okay, so you can see over time, you still hear me? Over time, the research publications in Ayurveda have peaked, and they're sort of leveling off here. And obviously, most of them are coming from India. But when you look at Ayurveda, you might look a little closer, and a lot of these publications are about curcumin. Curcumin is very famous about being reported, and that just puts it in the Ayurveda field. So that's sort of the scope. Let's see. But there's many areas, and while I'm going to be focusing on cancer, there's many areas of Ayurvedic approaches that can be applied to all these different aspects of health. When I look at Ayurveda and what I've learned over, I guess I've been sitting interested in it for about 30 years, and more focused study more recently in a master's program that I'm in. But just the whole concept of Ayurveda is that of equilibrium or ecology, that there's some existing balance in our physiology that Ayurveda taps into, as the human body itself is an ecological system. I really like this poster. We went to Yellowstone last year, and right there you can see all these aspects. The idea of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha in our body, it's in every part of nature. Everything that you look at in nature, you can see these components. So you can see the Vata in the air, and there's very light air, very dry air there. There's these incredible heat pools of sulfuric acid because there's a volcano right under in Yellowstone, and then the solid mountains and Kapha component of the earth there. So everywhere you look, you see Vata, Pitta, Kapha. So the outline of my talk is going to look at 4 areas of interest that I think Ayurveda can contribute to health and prevention of disease. We're going to look at rasayanas and herbs, prakriti, body constitution, and digestion, which is very important, and then the mind and the body and the spirit. So on each of these, I'm going to go over brief, just why would we be interested in it, and then some ideas of how to dig into that area with some research ideas. Some of them might be a little bit out there, so bear with me. So when a lot of people think about Ayurveda, they think of the herbs. They think of the immense pharmacopoeia of the whole aspect of how many available herbs and what's understood about them. And, of course, there's many pathways, multiple biochemical pathways that work synergistically and promote longevity and vitality. So a lot of studies have been done on these herbs to show antimicrobial, anti-cancer, immunomodulation effects. And, the idea is to nourish the whole body. And even there's some that are being used for cancers. I learned last night at the Pune hospital, somebody's using ashwagandha just for cancer. Just ashwagandha, of course, of other modalities. So how do we take this to the existing modern research scientific community and say, how do we look at some of these things? What can we learn from them? I think understanding the traditional use of the Ayurvedic herbs which could uncover some of the constituents, the chemicals that are used in there, that we might be able to find some unique mechanisms, some emergent synergistic mechanisms. That means that we would see something, we might be looking at one pathway, but we're finding a couple of pathways being tweaked. And there's something new that we can learn from looking at these herbs. We go back and look at how they were used traditionally. Many herbs are called immune boosting or adaptogens. What is the cellular molecular target of that concept? How can you measure that? See, I'm going back to, I want to take this back and I'm going to say to people, this is what it does. And they'll say, show me the data. And I'll say, well, we can measure this, this, and this. I know that's reductionist, but that's what the language that we're going to need. What are some of the epigenetic mechanisms of Ayurvedic herbs and modalities? We need to understand that the herbs might be working on not just the cellular level, but the tissue microenvironment, and most likely they are, and also in the epigenetic levels. So we need the methodologies to look at these mechanisms. And a couple of other things we need to learn about herb-drug interactions and be able to standardize these preparations. So the potential here is to discover new cellular and systemic pathways that are used by these compounds. Okay, moving to the body constitution, or prakriti. These, of course, are the doshas of Vata, Pitta, Kapha, learning about how the body is constructed and what the effects of these different components of nature are on our individual physiology. Understanding that different doshas and prakritis the people may have different responses to environment and drug. So the aim of Ayurveda is obviously to restore the balance between these doshas. And we should try to treat patients differently according to their type, because it's the imbalance in these that lead to disease. So here's an example of personalized therapy, a real buzzword these days. You're very familiar with all the different properties of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. I have a little analogy that helps some other people understand what we mean by that. So Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So here's this little guy. So Kapha is the structure of this little car and how it's put together and it stays together. The Pitta is the metabolism, the engine driving that car. And the Vata is where is it going? What's the GPS? What's the destination? So some questions that we might have about or applications of body constitution to research. So what does understanding the three doshas and the expression of them in the body teach us about cancer progression and treatments, or any other type of disease type? Do different body types get different kinds of cancers? Can we use Prakriti to stratify patients to different arms? This is kind of a hypothetical survival response, that if we did a particular treatment and we found that those with the Vata constitution did very well compared to the other two, we could go in and say why. You know, here's an example of some difference in the heterogeneity of the human population. So a lot of work is done on graphs like this, that there will be a treatment and one will respond very well, another will not, even though you're targeting a very similar target or pathway. And there's millions of dollars that are spent on determining the difference between these two people. We'll take the genome of this person and the genome of that person and match them up and see what's different. And then, oh, we find a new gene here. That must be the difference. And so we go after that gene. It's this reductionist wormhole. So how can we, if we can add this component of Prakriti to this graph, could we sort of start saying, well, maybe those with the Vata constitution have this other aspect going on in their physiology? Another way of thinking about Prakriti research questions, and I've been to so many conferences that show myriads and myriads of data that's being collected on all of these different patients with all of these different treatments, and it's our idea is just if we get enough data, we'll figure it out. But there's terabytes of data now, and how do we sort all that out? So we have these examples of databases that are publicly available. I mean, could we go in there and mine some of that data and say, well, there's this gene expressed, and that's sort of a Vata quality. Could we sort of start typing into those? And there's a couple of ways I'm thinking about doing these. Let's see. So could we add Prakriti analysis to evaluate large omics, genomics, proteomics, metabolomics? We're even phenotyping the immune system now. And could we correlate some of that genome and phenotype to body types? So we're not going to, I'm just not ready to throw out all this reduction, the reductionist protocols. Could we do that prospective? If we have a clinical trial, we could determine the Prakriti and determine either which arm to put that patient in, or when they respond, if that might be why their response is. Could we do it retrospectively, going back to those databases and understanding the expression of particular genes might give a hint to what the Prakriti was if we don't know that Prakriti? Could we go back into electronic records, electronic health records, which may be available, and based on those particular constitutional components, could we decipher what that person's Prakriti was? So basically, what information could we glean from existing data sets that could include and that could indicate the Prakriti? And that, there's so many questions though. So how do you actually standardize that? I've seen some algorithms that can put together the Prakriti, some kind of questionnaire, and then you type the person in like that. So there's a lot of questions. And how do you standardize, if you're using a pulse diagnosis technique, how do you standardize that across a clinical trial? So the big questions to get there. But I appreciate a lot of work that has been done in the area of genomics and database analysis, and some of the work on body types and phenotype traits, etc. So, you've all been very busy, and we need to put it all together and do even more. And the last question, and this one I think is a little bit out there, but maybe we can think about it. Can we characterize expression of VPK on the cellular or molecular level? We saw Vata Pitta Kapha in Yellowstone Park, but can we see it inside the cell? Could you look at an intracellular or molecular correlatives for the Prakriti or the Prakriti? For instance, could Vata be a DNA phosphorylation, communication, transportation, intelligence kind of genes that are related to that? Pitta would be the mitochondrial genes, ATP transformation, metabolism, and Kapha would be the cytoskeletal cellular membrane structure. How could we line those up? Could we go and figure that out? And what would be the biomarkers of increased or decreased Vata in a clinical trial? How could we measure that? But here's the idea about typing the genes themselves. If we look at glutamine metabolism, is that like a Pitta process? And could we put that together with a Vata process, the signaling, transduction, and then Kapha being the structure, the actin component. And then here's an exercise for the students, if you could determine the different dosha properties or the gunas of the different genes, like the metabolism genes, growth, proliferation, survival, transcription, all of these receptors and proteins, can we put them in a category? And if you had something that made any sense, go back and look at some of these databases and say, we see that there's this pattern here. It might be a little bit far out there. It might be something to think about. I'll leave that to the students. So moving on, let's go back to the next section of digestion. How important is digestion in Ayurveda? Anybody have an idea? Like, most important? It's everything that goes into your mouth that becomes what is you, and whatever you digest becomes who you are, and how the Agni is in each person. It's a digestive fire that turns the food into these finest building blocks for life. So the perception is that incomplete digestion results in ama and is expressed in early disease stages. This is becoming known as some of the source of inflammation. And if you look at many diseases, cancer, cardiovascular, arthritis, and all those have this inflammation component that initiates the whole disease process. So we know that ama contributes to clogged channels of circulation, the tissues, and contributes to the doshas being out of balance. So that's like the first stages of pathogenesis. And it's estimated that 80% of cancers have this nutritional diet component. So it's not just what you eat, but how it's digested that's very important. Is it completely digested? Is it processed through all the different dhatus and shrotas, etc.? The concept of ama and ojas. If Agni is weak or dull, the ama is produced instead of ojas as a digestive endpoint. And then ama is this vicious substance that produced in the gut and elsewhere that weakens the digestion and metabolism. So the circulation of this ama gets deposited in different areas of the body and sort of initiates that inflammation response. On the other hand, ojas is the end product of sequential tissue metabolism, determines the body's strength and energy and immunity. I got 3 minutes. All right. What I found really interesting with the explosion of the microbiome recently is the relationship between the microbiome and potential relationship between that and understanding ama as being that interface where the mind, well, let's look at this. This says in our body we have this 30 trillion microorganisms living within each person, and the lower gut contains most of those microorganisms. So can we look at the microbes that are in the gut, which is interacting with the immune system, and that both of them, the gut changes the immune system changes the gut, changes how we digest our food, and that could be one of these characterizations of what ama is. It's that interface between the gut microbiome and the immunity. So some questions here is, what is the biological or biochemical physical component of ama? Can we type that? Can we measure that? Can we measure ojas? These, you're probably thinking I'm a little crazy, but I'm looking at the perspective. How do we measure these things? So there's other areas of research, how toxins are embedded, research into panchakarma. But that's moving on. I wanted to finish off with the area of body, mind, and spirit is very important, as we just heard. Ayurveda also expresses developing, expanding consciousness using meditation and yoga. And we understand yoga is that least excited state of consciousness, that pure consciousness. So it's that connection with the self or the atma. That pure consciousness is a principle of healing. It's just what we just heard. When the mind connects with the transcendent, the body experiences that rest and is allowed to establish that homeostasis. When they're connected, when we are experiencing that quieter self, the body is also allowed to heal. And so this relates to the psychoneuroendocrine immune integration of physiology. So what are some of the research targets here? Can we look at mechanisms of stress effects on disease when we're trying to establish a sense of meditation? What's the role of stress in health? And what are the mechanisms of disease? There has been a lot of work, yoga and meditation research. And I think one interesting conundrum for clinical science is the placebo, where they think, oh, this is very annoying that the placebo is having a response here, but that might be hinting to what the body's natural ability to heal itself is. So in summary, we looked at all the contributions of the herbs, prakriti, digestion, and mind, body, spirit to health, and then some of the challenges that we will be facing that currently are approach to clinical trials is sort of double-blind, placebo-controlled. It's really not applicable for this kind of approach. We need innovative whole systems clinical research. Maybe even what our current standard of care is plus or minus Ayurveda. I mean, we really need a home run. We really need to have at least an example of Ayurveda's contribution to current health to stimulate the research community to think, oh, there is something there. And then we see the result and then go back and understand the mechanisms, perhaps. At the same time, we need to help the Ayurvedic clinicians get training in systemic documentation and research methodologies. How do we standardize these diagnoses? And we'd like to increase collaborations and communications between the Ayurvedic experts. A lot of people have their own ideas about how things work and how things are done. How do we validate the Ayurvedic concepts for clinical use? What's really measurable? If we're saying that this result is a Vata dosha, they're responding, these are not, how do we measure that, and how do we promote that concept? Are there biomarkers of that? Are there biomarkers of increased doses or decreased doses? Biomarkers of ojas and agni? So maybe thinking in the ultimate omics and AYUR array, is there a way we can develop a multiplex AYUR array that includes all of the epigenetics, biome, hormones, immunotyping, and prakriti? So going forward, we need to increase awareness of modern clinicians about Ayurveda, close the communication gap between allopathic and Ayurvedic practitioners, develop new research methodologies for whole systems, incorporate scientific rigor and reproducibility, make your science really strong, undisputable, and to put together a public bioinformatic database and sharing capacity so we can help translate these Ayurvedic principles for allopathic researchers to understand the value for health and prevention. So thank you very much for listening. This is the old loop of evolution of healthcare. So thank you.
Only question, no another lecture, please.
Hi Julia, my name is Anuj and I come from a typical background of yours, from the allopathy background, and now kind of looking forward to make my career in the Ayurveda space. This kind of session kind of interested me a lot, primarily because
Ask the question.
yeah, oncology, you are talking the role of the rasayana in the cancer, right? I come from a company called Maharshi Ayurveda, so we have a rasayana called as Amrit Kalash, which has done trials, clinical trials more than 50 plus. The problem that I want to ask you is that the clinical trials that are typically conducted in the oncology space, right? Be it the double blind or the single blind and the randomized. In Ayurveda, there's a lot of challenges
What
in,
is the question?
in formulating
Please.
the, yeah, so
Please
there are,
come down to the question.
yes sir, yes sir. So I just want to ask you, Julia, how do you see the Ayurveda clinical landscape shaping up vis-a-vis the allopathic ones? Because there's no one single kind of approach or the pathways that you have typically in, in allopathy. And this is a problem that I've seen in the US, Europe and India as well. So your comments on that.
That's exactly the problem, is putting these research things together. And how do we, I mean, for Amrit Kalash, can you use that standard of care plus that or minus that? And then what are the correlatives of response? Yes, so I actually did some work on that back in the 80s in vitro. And it's a very complex...
May I ask,
yes, sir.
May I just intervene? What has happened in last 20 years in India in relation to clinical research in Ayurveda? Many people are not even aware. Nimitli process was one beginning, but we have started Ayurvedic pharmacoepidemiology, which will be covered tomorrow afternoon. Instead of pharmacovigilance, we have reverse pharmacology, observational studies, and my lifetime has gone in double-blind, randomized controlled trials and clinical pharmacology. But I feel that we are not testing a new chemical entities. We are testing something which is used by hundreds of people, thousands of people. So the methodology is totally different. And it has been well stated, well published, and also well utilized in several trials with good evidence. But we come again and again that there is no way has already been established. And I would request all of you to go back again, study the literature, see what is reverse pharmacology, what is Ayurvedic epidemiology, what is network pharmacology. So I would request that Amrit Kalash has this potential of doing Ayurvedic pharmacoepidemiology. So many people are using it. Just study, profile them clinically, profile them biochemically, immunologically, over a period of year or 2 years. And if you have 1,000 patients, you will come up with data which would be really interesting. Thank you, Julia, for your presentation. I have some brief comments. Dr. Mutalik is my senior. He appeared a bit critical of what's happening in Ayurvedic research in India. But I think having settled in Florida, he probably is not kept up as much as what's happening at grassroots level in India. Students, postgraduates, faculty are contributing significantly. But we did not follow the paradigm of the Western paradigm of research also. We can evolve our own paradigm. And some of the papers which were criticized by Julia and even Dr. Mutalik and others, the meager facilities we have, the meager infrastructure we have, the meager support we have in terms of research, still the kids, I tell you, the children are doing outstanding work in their PhD, MD thesis. They are just lining the libraries. There are hits there, there are leads there, there are hints there. What the world wants is a candidate. And you cannot have a candidate right away for a drug usage which a company can grab. That's not Ayurveda. So I would say that in a short term, one may be pessimistic. In a long term, we have to be very optimistic. And second criticism that I would like to make is this fight between reductionism and holism. Frankly, that fight is in the mind of the person. There is no fight, frankly. Because we need reductionist science, we need studies at all levels of biological organization, and we want to integrate that. So we need holism as well as reductionism. But it's very difficult for a person who is raised in one mode of reductionist education and science to understand what holism is. And one who is wedded to holism poo-poos totally reductionism. And I think the book that Girish, Patwardhan and Mutalik sir have written, these aspects have been very well covered. So let's bury forever the hatchets between the reductionism and holism. There is no fight. Second point about AyurYoga. In past, Vaidyas were yogis. I would like to know how many of you have practiced Raja Yoga. Raise hands. Everybody. Raise hands. Yes, Alex is there. In front row there are 3/4. But students and other faculty, I don't see any. You have to raise hand also. You have done practice yoga. So what I feel is, if we carry home message today that before we will start AyurYoga, if each of us starts practicing yoga, not the calisthenics of yoga, not the asanas of yoga, but chitta vritti nirodha, yama nirama. And I tell you, I recommend strongly Vivekananda's book on Raj Yoga. You practice for 6 months and you will come across amazing results, particularly of Vibhutipad. And Vibhutipad explains how human consciousness itself is an amazing frontier even now. Third point I want to mention is Julia's in terms of cancer. Yesterday my student Dr. Siddesh was to present. I think he could not present and we have no time now, Girish. But I have been interested in cancer for 30 years. Like Dr. Kulkarni also is interested for so many years. And I think that we did not, Julia covered very well the entire Ayurvedic background and tried to understand in terms of cancer, in terms of Ayurvedic epistemology. But Ayurveda has management also. Ayurveda, the concept of even the pathogenesis. So Shatkriya Kal of cancer is very important. So है संचय प्रकोप प्रसर स्थान संशय व्यक्ति and भेद, and you can describe cancer in those 6 stages, Shatkriya Kal. And cancer is a chronic disease. Once a cell gets transformed, it takes about 10 to 15 years to manifest the tumor. So body is trying to eliminate all the transformed cells all the while. And sometimes the cancer, established cancer with metastasis vanishes. This is called spontaneous regression of cancer. That has been my interest for 30 years. Nature is trying to whisper to us how cancer can vanish. If we understand that, probably we'll be able to help to control the quality of life and prolong the life also. And I believe that we had yesterday a session with the chairman of the Go Vidya Ayog of the Indian nation, and Dr. Joglekar took me there, and he's very much interested in the cow products having anti-cancer properties. So we are studying the distillate of cow urine in several cell lines, and we have also recorded cases reported in the country also of long survival after Gomutra Ark. But somebody who talks of urine or somebody took, see, up till now microbiome, so shit has become respectable. But urine has not yet become respectable. But many of our hormones, many of our things were isolated from urine. Urine is one of the most complex biological fluid. And Siddesh could not present, but I will share with all of you. In 1963, I was reading a paper from New York Academy of Sciences where ureters were transplanted in the colon in a case of bladder cancer. And that too transitional cell carcinoma, Dr. Kulkarni, aggressive cancer. They transplanted the ureter in the colon, they went back and cystoscopy, the tumor had vanished. all urine was dipping into the colon. And then retin was isolated from human urine by Dr. St. Georgi, and a science paper, tremendous regression of cancer. So sometimes these hits and leads are there all over the world, and in Bhrigu Samhita, cancer treatment has been described, where urine therapy has been described 3000 BC. So sometimes in our hubris, and hubris is not only the monopoly of seductive scientists. Hubris is also entering Ayurveda. I would request all youngsters to keep in mind, never have a hubris of Ayurveda superiority. Because the book which I have brought here, and I will end with this because we have less time, this book is doctored, The Disillusionment of an American Physician. So I was talking to Darshan in the beginning. There is a disillusionment in all systems of healthcare. Show me a single system of healthcare which is not having disillusionment. Because on one side, the Western system, the American system, insurance laden, the doctors are become paper pushers. And they get frustrated. And that's the book written by American physician. On the other side, India's side, Ayurvedic physicians, why should not have the best investigative facilities in every teaching hospital of India? Why should not MRI, scan, scopy, and all of you are capable of doing that. I don't think that suddenly those who went to modern medicine can do it and those who cannot do it. And we are pushing it at central level, Darshan, myself, that how to modernize. And tomorrow we have a session on that also. Lastly, I would like to share with you that yoga is not only chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga karmasu kaushalam. Karmasu kaushalam is yoga. So when you have skills in your action, in your thoughts, in your feelings, then it is yoga. And another definition of is yoga samatvam yoga muchyate. So a balanced, equanimous mind is yoga. And that itself we know will lead to dhatu samya, dosha samya, and the definition of swastha we have. Thank you very much, Girish, for giving me a few minutes.
Thank you very much. So many dots are getting connected as Dr. Vaidya expressed and what Dr. Julia said about initiating few of the studies. She mentioned the TCGA initiative, and I'm sure our next session will take up that particular lead. Our next session will be, before we begin, I request Dr. Hoti ji to felicitate our chairperson, Dr. Ashok Vaidya ji.